Thank you, João. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you all for being here. And I want to start with the, sorry, just 1 second, because I have to change the views. Just 1 second. Yeah. So thank you all, and I want to start by thanking Fernando Silva and Paulo Jesus for the organization of this event, and I want to thank the audience and also my fellow researchers, the small research group that I'm part of, that we have been working for many years. So we are a transdisciplinary group and we've been working for many years together, so it's a great pleasure for me to be here. And it's particularly important because of the open science. I'm a great activist for open science, and this event is a very good opportunity to prove the merits of open science. So after I'll share my screen. Wait, sorry. Wait, because I'm not using my computer, so it's where am I? Desktop. Yeah, I found you. Yeah, because this was already open, but apparently I couldn't get here. Yes, and back here. And to the share screen. Share. Sorry, this took longer than I waited. Are you watching? Is it all, everything okay? Yeah. Okay, so my presentation is on empathy, promise, and the performative of images. And I use this time span from today, from this year, 2022, for the next 50 years, and trying to look at the horizons of thought and action. And I want to thank Rogério Duarte and Rafael Perez and Marc Jacquinet for the teamwork. So the hint, I start with this, it's the starting of a poem from Mary Horwitz from 1829. Will you walk into my parlor? Said the spider to the fly. And so it's trying to, the hint for for this presentation is that, is there a kind of equivoque in contemporary societies in human thought and action? And it's interesting that this poem is, according to the publication, last publication in 2002 of the re-editing of this book, it's the opening line that is one of the most recognized and quoted first lines in all English verse. So it's quite amazing. And they refer to this issue of seduction and manipulation and flattery and charm. And the argument for this presentation is the games we play within ourselves. So it's not seduction and manipulation from the outside, but it's within ourselves, and empathy is a way through to that issue. So the structure, the message, the context, the authors, the ecosystem, line of reasoning, and the phenomenology, and then conclusions. So it's a long presentation, but I'll try to go, well, it's like slow food, like layer after layer, like peeling an onion. So the message, the performative of images, the promise as openness and trust, the importance of mythology, religion within technoscience, and the deterministic versus non-deterministic reality, and this antiquity versus modernity. So this is maybe the most important slide of the 30 slides that I have, because it's this kind of creative tension that, of course, it has historical context, but it's open until today, and from antiquity, the issue of determinism was absolutely crucial and was really the prediction, control, having this perfect knowledge of something that you could predict. That is still true today. And however, modernity tried to open some some ways or some alternatives, and we're still within that context. So that's the argument. And the argument goes further to argue that today's science, today's techno-science, today's technology environment is an heritage from layer after layer of this evolution from mythology to religion to science, so that today's technology and today's science is absolutely embedded with the religious structures and mythology archetypes in terms of collective imaginary. So that the promise, the openness and trust is not something you choose, it's something that is prior to the human condition. Even within a context of hate or context of violence, someone has promised something better, and that unleashed openness and trust. And without it, humans wouldn't survive individually or collectively. And how does this happen? Through the performative of images. So constantly schemes, texts, thought, action, language, knowledge is layer after layer embodied, embedded through the performative of images. So that's the big message. And so I took a long time here. I'm not going to stay for long in other slides. Empathy, how does empathy come in? Empathy is like a tip of the iceberg that connects us to the otherness within our own inner world, the strange and familiar within ourselves, and expanding the horizons of thought and action within oneself. So the message that we are trying to work on is that, of course, this is there's a huge variety on how to look at empathy. We are trying to look inside and say, well, take your turn. It's your turn to see how do you deal with your own otherness, your own strangeness, your own familiar issues, your own horizons of thought and action. So that's the argument of the main message. So the context. The context is this time span, 1972, 2022, and then 2072. So the next 50 years. Maybe some of us will not be here to see it happening, but the context is precisely one of celebrating 50 years of the publication of The Limits to Growth. It was a report published by the Club of Rome, though the authors are a couple, so a man and a woman, and another young researcher. The research itself was done by a group of about 8 high-ranking scientists, male, white, highly educated, mainly European. There was one Chinese from hard sciences. I think that one was from a background in economics, so no humanities. So mathematics, physics, so really hard sciences, and they had the career in the in scientific organizations like the MIT or international institutions. So they knew very, very well, and they didn't trust governments. They didn't trust, as I said, well, the world is going crazy and we have to spread the word that we can leave this to scientists or to institutions and to governments. So we have to publish to the big public, and that's what they did. That's what they did 50 years ago. So, and basically it's the power of mathematics. So very, very simple mathematics. If you have exponential rates of growth at a certain stage, they collapse. It's impossible to sustain. So that's the context. Also context, January 2022, today is the 18th of January, so we are, and United Nations estimates that we are 7.9 billion people that are alive today. So what are the questions and answers that we ask and answer one another? So that's the kind of how we position ourselves, what's the context, and how each one of us has an heritage and has unfinished stories. So we all inherit wars that are not our own. So we are all fighting for causes that maybe are not our choices. So that's that kind of, so empathy is that open challenge and the questioning force of a common language. Well, sorry, I'll go back. Common language is of course you'll say, well, but there's so many different views on empathy. Well, don't worry. 80 people got together to make a conference on empathy. So we are here. So there is a common language. It doesn't matter if it's a European, non-European. It's a kind of a common interest. That's what I'm referring to. Context. So the convergence that we are living here today. And there's also convergence that we can say for the last 200 years, a convergence between production of knowledge, use of knowledge, and dissemination of knowledge. So for my linear, this would take a long time to go from academia, the production of knowledge, or the monasteries, or wherever in the philosophy academies in Athens, or from the monasteries in medieval Europe. It would take some time. For the last 100 years, you have policymakers, scientists, the mass media, and the public opinion coming closer and closer together. So it's this kind of empathy. It's the kind of convergence that you see in empathy within the concept of empathy, namely through this conference, and also across the board. So common discourses and multiple cross influencing for the good and for the bad. Authors. I'm referring to three huge authors, three monsters, Hannah Arendt, Emmanuel Levinas, and Michel Henry. Of course, there are lots of wonderful authors, but these three authors, they are very much cult figures. They represent something more than just academia. They bring a position in relation to the historical times they lived. They bring an heritage. They bring a very, very specific mixture of cultures, geographical influences. So they are very, very special, I believe, and they bring, and each one of them produced a huge amount of work. And I'm referring to slices of their work, but they are pearls, they are germs, because they enable us to position ourselves. So in a way, they were writing for the reality we are living today. That's the argument. It's truer what they were saying now. It's true what they were saying now than it was in their lifetime. So that's quite something. So it's like receiving a message from the bottle, and the message is right to our heart, right to the point. So in relation to Hannah Arendt, it's the Eichmann in Jerusalem, the report on the banality of evil, and how is it possible to denounce the fascination for evil, and because that's what it happens today, and how we can have this working process, this continuation of work that continuously, still today, there's a kind of a logical of denial, and that is efficient in itself, and that's prevailing. And I'm referring to, the two world wars in the 20th century, the Spanish Civil War, 36-39, and arguing that, well, that logic hasn't changed much. That's the issue to be pointed at. From Emmanuel Levinas it's interesting that it's almost as if it's this like spirituality writing, this mysticism of being extremely within. So when he writes about the other, the face of the other, it's very much from it's not really a Jewish heritage. He was from a Jewish family, but it's so it's not so much a tradition, but it's the capacity to innovate, the capacity to go further and further and further, and to bring this wonderful, really powerful concepts of the face of the other, the infinite responsibility for the other in capital letters, so the big other, and this makes us question the role of moral philosophy and how political science and economic science and political economics has gone so far away from moral philosophy. So the perils and ghettos that we are living within social science in general and within political science in particular. And how because Adam Smith was writing in moral philosophy. So modern economics has a moral philosophy that has been lost. So, from my interpretation, Levinas is a good way to bring that reality, that the importance of that kind of interpretation. Then Michel Henry. Michel Henry is a great phenomenologist, really with a huge work, and it's this reality that manifests itself, and it's through the manifestation itself that you apprehend reality. And how? Because you are already participating in it. So it's this kind of mirror game that on one hand you have manifestation, on the other hand you have participation, and you can look from one side or from the other, but in fact you are talking about something that is it's moving, it's changing all the time, and it's constantly full of possibilities. And so it uses ipseity, that uniqueness of each individual. And so it's the 7.9 billion individuals that are carriers of this ipseity. Of course, writers, dead writers, we can connect through their reading them, or listening to music, or for a dead composer, or watching a film, or painting, whatever. We can connect to the ipseity of people that are not alive, but it's much more interesting to connect to the ones that are alive. So Michel Henry works on this radical phenomenology, that is radical materiality, arguing that all reality, all material reality holds that invisibility, that capacity, that potential, that is reality manifesting itself, and that we participate exactly by apprehending that invisible side of material reality. And of course, this is very, very strong in the connection to Dilthey's work in the 19th century and the philosophy of life tradition. Now, the ecosystem. So where are we standing? So, and I list here knowledge, action, language and meaning, literature, theology and history, philosophy, the social sciences, data sciences, technoscience, natural science, decision-making sciences, art, sports and the media. And the argument is that no matter where you look, you'll find the same pattern. You'll find people that were absolutely engaged in what we're doing. And some of these areas go a bit further than others, but of course, you can look at knowledge from a very, like a commodity, like something that is you can accumulate, or you can look from an embodied, embedded, already present in the social practices and in language use. And meaning is something, is a process, is meaning making, and action and language from the perspective of philosophy of action and philosophy of language, also from this kind of constant manifestation process that humans participate with, together with all reality. And then arguing that literature is really the top, really at the, like the emergent, like the visible side, the tip of the iceberg. Why? Because literature is already ahead, is already capturing everything that is happening. And philosophy lags behind. Philosophy has to digest a little bit. So it's like the slow food, and literature is running ahead. And the reason I connected to theology and to history is that if we accept the hypothesis and the proposal that both bits and religion are very active today through technology, through science, and that today's the way we think, the performative of images, performativity of images is through this kind of mythological reasoning, then we should take seriously both history and theology. And then arguing that technosciences, natural science, decision-making sciences, of course, very connected to data sciences, are this process of continually interpreting what is happening and living through. And if you want case studies, if you want real life examples of how humans are exceeding themselves, breaking records in art, in sports, in the media, in the mass media, in the social media, well, both sports and arts are a good example. So this is the ecosystem. Again, ecosystem, how does it work? It works through catching words, and words are meaningless. Words need to be, the units of meaning are sentences. So you choose very well words and combine them. And the sentence itself is the one that is enables us to go to slogans, to propaganda, and to gradually or continuously work on repetition. And there's no saturation. There's no limit. It can go on and on and on and on. Why? Because it's connecting to an infinite source of energy. Why? Because it's the imagination, it's the memory, it's the will, it's the capacity of humans to create new realities constantly. So again, it's the mythological heritage, it's the religious heritage that is embedded in today's technology and today's science. Again, ecosystem, it works like addiction. So it's an addiction mechanism. So again, it's the exponential growth graph. You grow it until you bust. You don't stop. And how do you see this? You see this in fallacies that are desired and fought for. So how can someone say, well, I know this is wrong, or I know this is not true, but I want to believe in this. I want to fight for this. So, and let's say, so is that, how can be equivocs that are so well grounded? How can you explain that? And so on one hand, you have this kind of ambiguity, paradox, really conflict and really incongruence. You say, how is it possible? And you say, well, there's a way to it. If you crack the code, the shift will be very, very fast. The change will be around the corner. Why? Because it's just an equivoque. If you realize that you're wrong, well, it's like a click, you change. So finishing the ecosystem, we have the line of reasoning. So the words in sentences, I've already covered this. So we pick carefully words and then organize them effectively in sentences. And we could keep doing this. We keep doing this. And that's, so we dismount and reframe the history of humankind. So first we have to acknowledge this in ourselves, and we say, well, the whole history of humankind has been like this. Even before language was invented, we were already trying to use sign language to create and construct it, deconstruct and reconstruct. So it's the co-construction. So arguments are needed, but experiencing comes first. So there's no use in arguing with someone who's not experienced, doesn't come from your world of experience. So first we have to take care of the experience, the pathos, the ethos, the habitats, the cozy, we have to host places and time spans that you can experience something, and then you can use arguments. So arguments and experiences. So to announce includes unavoidably to denounce, to expose, and it's mechanism of denounce. So it's not starting, well, you're wrong. It's not how you should be thinking. Well, you did this wrong. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You announce something, you promise something, and if it works, it starts going and it attracts its own energy. So the power of statements, the power of manifestos, and life as it is lived. So the live testimonies, how you actually live. Again, the line of reasoning. So ask yourself, repeat the question, go back later, pick different times of the day, choose the changes of light, and is empathy relevant? Are you empathic towards yourself? I want to highlight here the changes of light. Changes of light are really magic, really magic. So throughout the day, both, well, changes of light are really, really special because it changes everything. And it's very much, well, it's a unique experience. And I'm sure everyone has experienced that, how you, through changing the light that you're exposed to within the room or outside or the sunset or whatever, something changes. So it's that kind of position. So still line of reasoning. the inner world, the open scenes for thought and action, how everything is reflected within ourselves, our bodies, new horizons, new borders, new frontiers, new limits. What's the limit of my body? Is it the zoom? Is it this, how you say, the energetic field that is about 50 centimeters around me? So where goes my imagination, my will, my memory? Is it individual, collective? Where did it come from? So empathic as this kind of open movement. Again, the line of reasoning, the social roles we play within ourselves, and the life cycle modularity. Are we the same? We are the same people we were children, but what do we remember? How would we experience something? How we imagine ourselves in the future? So it's this kind of these different models of lifespan horizons. It's like the changes of light. So how do we deal with this? So group thinking and action, and what kind of effect it has within ourselves, within the social roles we play within ourselves. So empathy is this kind of exploration. It's this trying to explore and map this. So on top, the field, this knowledge field. So ontophonology is my last topic, and of course it's the so the first statement is this argument that Husserl's pioneer and grounding work enabled not just drawing a spectrum, but stretching a spectrum that would go from logical positivism to ontophonology, really, really far away. So you have social constructivism quite close to neo-positivism, and then you have ontophonology or hermeneutic phenomenology really further away. So it's this, how could one mind map reality or an approach to reality and methodology created this field of knowledge, this knowledge school that is still grounding our work today. And then Heidegger's ontic and ontological distinction, how it's the ontic, the lived reality that each one of us is given, and how we can have this continuum from common knowledge to science to techno-science. Why? Because for millennia, you'd have science on one side, and you'd have common knowledge totally separate. And through trying to grasp how we don't throw away the ladder after climbing to this beautiful cloud of science. No, we have to constantly connect to this lived experience of our everyday life. On the phenomenology, I mentioned the hermeneutics turn, the technological turn, the theological turn, and I mentioned text, schemes, images, and why. Of course, these are interchangeable. Of course, you have images related to text, or texts are images, and schemes are within text, and so it's not really just the reason I chose this relationship is hermeneutic, exegesis of sacred text. So text is very, very relevant, and with the technology term, you have this kind of a scheme and logical image of how you connect things, how you make connections between wholes and parts of wholes, and the theological turn in phenomenology in terms of images that again bring that heritage of like spirituality, agnosticism, atheism, so it's, you have the whole spectrum from religious and mythological to this atheism and agnostic perspective or like spirituality perspectives. So that's what I'm arguing, is that you have to go all the way. So and it's this idea is very, very strong, that you have epistemic shifts, so everyone takes the wave. You have the surfer in the surfboard, and what I'm looking for is the surfboard. So you use the vehicle, you use the toolkit, you just use it. So if there are no waves, if there's no surfer, don't worry, you have a surfboard. If you take the surfboard to a swimming pool and there are no waves, it's okay. You can rest on top of the surfboard. Do whatever you want, but just go ahead. So entrepreneurology,
I'm
again,
sorry to interrupt, but just to let you know that it has been 13 minutes since the beginning. So when you can, please.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm right at the end. So I've already covered this, the importance of the academic structures and the importance of open science, the literature that's the tip of the iceberg, the cultural, social, political responsibilities for empathy, and the scientific community's perseverance and action. The ontological I've already covered, the inescapable, the existential and beyond, the transcendence and immanence, the life as givenness, and then phenomenology as a process, as a method, the ongoing continuum. Then participation in social practices and language use leads to this empathy, and the promise is truth. Also the relationship between phenomenology, ontology, and dance, choreography, play, language games, the Wittgenstein concept, schemes, hierarchies, even if they are distributed, you have hierarchies of values, sociocracy, holacracy, prosumerism, how you have social governance, how all this connects to how ontophenomenology is active today, and empathy as self-discovery. So back to the things themselves, is it still valid today more than ever? Do we have slow results? Are we having a lot of misunderstandings and equivokes? And the argument is that yes, we are still connected to wars that are not ourselves, not our own, from myths, from religious into technoscience. So conclusions, the ontophenomenology, the prefigurative role and its given nature. So it's like the basic template, we are already there. Aaron, the shock of the banality of evil and versus the fascination for evil. Levinas, the otherness and the larger other within ourselves. Henry, the Ipsitians, and the 7 billion world population. The limits to growth, the time span from 1972 to 2072. How can we look at the horizons of thought and action? Historicity as imagination, will, and memory. And what are the open challenges? Contemporary societies and organizations and structures. And how can we hold this creative tension? How can we navigate this, create balance within these unbalanced states? There's peace as a process, and how can we host living spaces of debate, dialogue, encounter? And yes, we are preaching to the converted. So be yourself, everyone else is already taken, as Oscar Wilde told us. And to end, there's no way to peace. Peace is the way. So that's my 50 cents. And I thank you all. And I'll stop recording.